Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for being here for our first summer reading discussion series. Yay! I'm Niani Feelings from the cast of the first national tour of Mean Girls, and I'm so excited to be joined here today with some of my fellow castmates from tour and Broadway, as well as Tina Fey, of course, our scriptwriter and co-creator. And we're here with the amazing Angie Thomas, who is the author of The Hate You Give. Yes, welcome everybody. We are so excited to do this. We're just going to start first with some introductions. Let's start with Christina.
Hey everybody, I'm Christina Alavato. I play Gretchen in the Broadway company of Mean Girls. I'm so happy to be here today.
Hey y'all, I'm Ishelle. I am the swing and dance captain of the first national tour.
Hi everybody, I'm Chad Burris and I play Damien in the Broadway company.
What's up everyone, this is Camille Upshaw here and I am the OG Rachel Hamilton on Broadway.
Hi, I'm Sabrina Carpenter. I play Katie Heron right now. I mean, I only did 2 shows, but there's a pandemic, so we'll talk later.
I'm Rick Younger. I am the original Mr. Duval, well, the second one after Tim Meadows, but the original Broadway Mr. Duval on the Broadway cast of Mean Girls. Good to be here.
Hi, I'm Tina Fey, and I'm the book writer for Mean Girls on Broadway, and I wrote the movie, and I'm just very happy to be here today and so excited that Angie Thomas is here with us.
Yes, we're all so excited. Oh my gosh. Before we get started, all of us at Mean Girls wanted to say a huge thank you to all the fans out there who submitted so many thoughtful and interesting questions. We're going to try to cover a broad range of them in this discussion today, as well as in the follow-up Instagram Live that's immediately after this. So if you want to keep the conversation going, head over to our Instagram and we'll get that going. Okay. Angie's here. I'm going to tell you a little bit about her. Angie was born and raised and still lives in Jackson, Mississippi. A former teen rapper, she holds a BFA in creative writing from Belhaven University. Her award-winning, acclaimed debut novel, The Hate You Give, is a #1 New York Times bestseller and a major motion picture from Fox 2000. Starring Amanda Stenberg and directed by George Tillman Jr. Also, Sabrina was in it. Her second novel, On the Come Up, is also on sale now. Welcome, Angie, and thank you so much for being here. We're so excited to have you.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. This is an honor. I'm such a fan. So to be able to do this with you all means a whole lot. Thank you for using your platform. Thank you for choosing my book. Thank you for this opportunity. I'm excited to have this conversation.
Yes, thanks, Angie. We're so thankful to have you with us. So speaking of the platform, we want to begin by starting off with why we're here today. We've all been grappling with the murders across the country of George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, Nina Pop, Ahmaud Arbery, Botham Jean, Tamir Rice, and unfortunately the list goes on. And we continue to be horrified by the racial injustice which continues to be accepted in this country. As the national discourse has continued and kind of exploded on the subject right now, we felt like it was our responsibility, both as a brand and as a group of individuals at Mean Girls, to participate and help and facilitate some of these conversations that are really long overdue. Okay, before we dive into the specifics of the book and its relevance to what we're living through right now, I just want to give everyone a really quick chance to talk about our experiences with the last few weeks, whether it's been protests you've gone to, or learning or unlearning, self-reflection, or just your feelings. Angie, you want to start us off?
Yeah, the past few weeks have definitely been a roller coaster of emotions. When Mr. Floyd lost his life, I was in the middle of working on my third book, which is a prequel to The Hate You Give, about Star's father when he was a teenager. And I've been so focused on this book and writing and humanizing young Black boys through this story that's been my focus, that's been my goal, because so often they're dehumanized. And when Mr. Floyd lost his life in such a dehumanizing way, it was a gut punch. But what I've learned is, as a Black person in America, I often have to multitask with my emotions. So in the middle of that, we're also dealing with the pandemic. I'm grieving for a man I never met. I'm trying to find joy and peace in my own life, and keep going and keep being creative. So it's been rough, but what I've learned over the past few weeks is to be kind to myself, to fight the good fight, to take care of myself, and that joy is sometimes my greatest form of resistance.
Absolutely. Anyone else want to chime in? Camille?
Sure. Yeah, I'll chime in. I agree with you on the multitasking of emotions. And because, for one, I'm always busy doing 8 shows a week or trying to visit my family or doing side projects, this was the first time that I really had to like sit and think and really like delve deep into how I'm feeling and what I'm feeling with no distractions. And there was something, it was really hard, but something really beautiful about it, because I think that it has made me grow as a person. And I've learned so much in this moment. And it's one of those ones where you're like, oh, I know about this. I understand this, but I have figured out a way to kind of dive deeper into that and to more fully understand, everything that's going on right now, and still educating myself. So yes, I agree with you with the the multitasking of emotions is a lot. And I think as Black people and people of color, like, we definitely do that a lot. But it was kind of nice to take a moment to really just sit and deal with the emotions that I kind of sometimes push aside.
Hi. I was gonna say, yeah, obviously it's been a incredibly stressful and emotional time, but I've also just been trying to educate myself, and also to try to abandon the privilege of the luxury of then like looking away. That there's too many moments like this in our recent history where we're like, everyone's focused for a short while, and then if you can look away, like, that's privilege, right? So, and just trying to find ways for every day to include action, as well as just like even small actions, just trying to find actions so that it's not just like, I think for white people, we're all trying to learn how to be like not performative, but actually participatory. So that's like the goal. Also still trying not to get COVID.
Yeah.
Well, I find that for me personally, I'm dealing with trying not to feel hopeless. I'm old enough to have seen so many things that look like the beginning of a change. I remember speaking with Brittany Nicholas, who's in the Broadway cast, and I was saying, not a lot of our cast was alive when Rodney King went on, when the Rodney King trial happened. And I remember at that time, it was like, oh my goodness, this is being videotaped. It's about to change. Then the verdict came out, and it was like, oh my goodness, even when what happens to us is seen, nothing happens. Then years pass and everyone gets cell phones, and then we start to see incident after incident that gets videotaped. And we're like, this is the one, Cassandra Bland. No, okay. It's going to be Philando Castile. It just piles up and it piles up. And you're like, okay, I want to have hope. And I want the people who are saying they want to make changes to keep that energy going. But it's hard when you've seen so many times when it looks like this is the moment. It feels a little different this time, I will admit that, but just knowing that right now, it takes a conscious effort for me to be hopeful, because history has told me differently. And like you said, when you throw in COVID and you throw in just trying to stay alive on that level, and also, you know, being concerned because I'm also a parent, I'm also a Black man. Also, let's not forget, everyone focuses on the lives of Black men. They're not treating Black women any better. So it's like, I also am the father of a daughter. So one of my biggest feats right now is trying to stay hopeful, to fight depression and anxiety and fear. And it's not easy.
Yeah, I feel you on that, Rick. I feel that this time sitting at home has actually given me an opportunity to grieve things that I have never had the opportunity to sit down and grieve. And allowing people who I've taken care of in a lot of ways to take care of me for once. And that's been a great learning lesson, but it's up and down. It's every day. I feel different from hour to hour. Anybody else have anything to add to that? No? Okay.
Oh, sorry.
Go on.
I was just gonna say, I think based on the discussion in general, like, and Angie, I think what's so interesting about your book is how it's always been like #1, I think, since the day you released it. That's how I feel. I feel like it's never left the charts. But what's been so interesting is to see all the people reaching out over the last few weeks and months, just discovering it for the first time. And I'm sure that's amazing, because it's a great tool and a great thing for people to use that are now educating themselves, and they're looking for resources, and they're starting the conversations. And I think that all we can do right now, like you said, to not just be performative allies, is to continue to educate ourselves and have those tough conversations with friends and family, and know that it's not just going to go away after one day or one conversation. It's something that has to be integrated into our everyday lives. And it's been really, really crazy to see kind of the people that have like popped in and out of the conversation when the trend was rising, and knowing that, like what you say, I mean, in the book and in the movie, it's the same story, and it's a different name. It's truly something that can't just exist as a trend. And I think that I've learned so much from going to these protests, and that have been really beautiful and peaceful, and the energy has been so unifying, that having these conversations, I think, is the best way that we can progress and move forward, at least that I've been able to see from having them with my friends and family.
Yes. Thank you all. I think we're ready to move on to some questions from the fans. Our first question for Angie is from Trina Ryan and Emma G. What was your inspiration to write the book, and was writing it hard for you?
The inspiration for the book came when I was a senior in college. I was a lot like Star in the sense I navigated two worlds: my mostly Black poor neighborhood in Jackson, Mississippi, and my mostly white upper class private Christian school in conservative Mississippi. I just said a mouthful, but you probably got a good idea what my college was like. I was the only Black student in my creative writing program. I was the first Black student to graduate from my creative writing program. So a lot of times when I'm in class as the only Black student, you know, when things like slavery are discussed, everybody's looking at me as if I got the answers, you know? So I found myself being two different people in two very different worlds. I would leave my house playing Tupac. By the time I got to college, I was listening to the Jonas Brothers. Don't judge me. I still love them. But I thought I had to change who I was, where I was. I was code switching. I was careful of how I spoke and how I presented myself. But it was a struggle. And I had so many different instances where I found myself being silent and not speaking up in the face of microaggressions. But eventually I got to a point where I could no longer be silent. And that unfortunately came as the result of a reaction to the shooting death of a young man named Oscar Grant in Oakland, California. Oscar was killed New Year's Day 2009 by police officers, and video shows him lying on his stomach, hands behind his back, unable to move, but for whatever reason, the officer shot him in the back. That led to riots and protests in Oakland, but it led to conversations here in Mississippi. And in my neighborhood, Oscar was one of us. I knew guys just like him. At my school, my classmates were like, well, maybe he deserved it. He was an ex-con. Why are people so upset? He should have just done what they told him to do. And I found myself so angry, hurt, and frustrated over and over and over again that I was like, I have two options. I could either A, burn down this entire campus to make a statement, or I could B, try to do something productive. Luckily, I decided to do something productive. The campus is still standing, but I decided to write. So I wrote a short story about a boy named Khalil, who was a lot like Oscar, and a girl named Star, who navigated two worlds like me. It was my senior project for college, and it was supposed to be a short story, and I kept adding to it, and my professor was like, darling, it says short story. It's got to be short. Maybe you should write this as a novel one day. So it took me a couple of years after graduation to take him up on that suggestion. It took a while because, for one, the story was so hard to write. It was emotionally taxing. And then, two, I foolishly hoped that after Oscar Grant, it was kind of like what you were saying earlier, Rick, that I thought, okay, after this, something's going to change. They caught this one on camera. Something's going to change. Something's going to change. Trayvon Martin happened. Michael Brown, Tamir Rice, Sandra Bland, and I'm finding myself angry, frustrated, hurt over and over and over again. So I decided to take that short story and write it as a novel, as hard as it was. But I did it for the kids in my neighborhood who said, well, every time they call Trayvon Martin a thug, they're calling me one. How am I supposed to feel about that? So I wrote it as a book for them with the intent of just getting it to them as my way of saying, I see you, I understand you, but more importantly, I love you. And that little love letter that I wrote to them has become something way bigger than I ever imagined.
That's beautiful. And it leads directly into our next question from Miranda. Did you ever expect the book to have so much of an impact and become such a part of understanding racism today? And furthermore, do you feel that things have changed since it was published in 2017?
I definitely never expected this. Like I was saying, I was just writing it for the kids in my neighborhood. I was thinking I'm gonna have to peddle this at the back of my trunk, something like that. You know how bootleggers be in the neighborhood, like, hey yo, I got this book, yo. I thought I was gonna have to do that. So I never expected. Here we are, 3 years later. The book is still on the New York Times list. I never expected it to be translated into over 40 languages and all these different countries. I never expected any of this. I never expected it to be required reading in some schools and then banned reading in others. You know, the book is one of the top 10 most banned books of the last 2 years. I never expected that. So it's shown me, though, that, you know, there are some things that young people do want to have these discussions about, even when it makes the adults in their lives uncomfortable. As far as have things changed, I think if nothing else, since the book has come out, more people are making themselves aware. And I wouldn't say that's because of the book. I just say that's because of the society we're living in and because of social media. But one thing I have noticed too is that more young people are speaking up and speaking out and doing things. Like Generation Z is on it. You know, and that's my readership right there. They're on it. They're, you know, trolling through TikTok. They're doing all these things. They're making it happen. And that's something that I'm seeing more of. And if my book played even a small role in showing them their power, I'm thankful for that. That's the legacy I'm cool with having.
It's a great legacy. And speaking of Oscar Grant, the movie about his last day, Fruitvale Station, I saw a few years back, and I have not seen it again, but I think about it almost daily. It really stuck with me, similarly to your book. We have a question from Danny Antonio. What do you think we can do as a society to prevent weaponizing stereotypes? Ishel, you want to speak to that?
Yeah. Hi, everyone. I think that we need to start within ourselves. stop stereotyping people point blank. But unfortunately, our country is built on a system that benefits from stereotyping people, a classist system. So we need to do our research, educate ourselves on the history that created these stereotypes, the system that perpetuates these stereotypes. Khalil in the book was murdered by a man who stereotyped him based on the color of his skin and what neighborhood he was in. The media perpetuated that stereotype by calling him a suspected drug dealer. They didn't know he was a drug dealer when they shot him. So that is part of the issue. So we need to stay educated and hold ourselves accountable, hold our media accountable, our elected officials accountable for allowing these stereotypes to be publicized. We can't uphold them. It's just not okay anymore.
Yeah. Sabrina, want to weigh in on that?
Yeah, I think we also tend to have a habit as people to get very stuck in our ways. Not so much this generation, like as we're talking about, I think we're very, very adaptable to change and taking in new information and forming new opinions based on that information. But I think that's something I've noticed, at least in like, dating back, so I'm not saying like old people, but some old people have a way of thinking that is very stuck in one way. And when that starts to change, I think it concerns them. They're afraid of losing that privilege that they've always had. And so I think I read something really profound about stereotypes being that they're basically just one side of the story, and by us giving into them and allowing them to exist, it emphasizes how we're different rather than how we are similar, which is just dividing us more and more than it is bringing us together. So I think exactly what you said, it starts point blank just by calling people out. These stereotypes don't have to exist. We don't have to allow them to exist. It starts in our friendship circles, in our family, and then it grows beyond there. Once someone says something that you're like, that's not, I think humor is also advanced in 2020. We can come up with something better than stereotyping people. We have the resources to do that. So I think it just starts with calling out our friends and family and making sure that they know.
Christina?
One of the things, Angie, that I think one of the reasons that this book should be required for younger people is actually this conversation about stereotypes, is that in reading the book, you get to know these characters so deeply on such a profound level, and you give such detail without even, by the end of the book, I feel like I'm friends with Star and with her dad and with Khalil. And I think that part of the reason this can be so profoundly helpful for young people to read as they're growing and learning and soaking in this kind of information is that you become connected in a way that's not about, one of my favorite moments is the end of the book where it's the picture of Khalil at the birthday party eating the cake, and then the picture of him with money, and explaining what those are, and that if you look at them and you have no idea who he is, as a society, we are systematically programmed to see it as a certain way, to see him as a certain type of person. And by the end of the book, you know so much about him and his heart. And to me, reading that, if I would have read this book when I was 12 or when I was a younger person, my perspective, I really believe, would have been different as I was growing. So I hope that this becomes even more required reading than it already is, because I think that's a huge part, is learning when we're younger and we're more susceptible to, making changes when we're children.
Yeah. Rick?
I feel a key to stereotypes is those of us who creating a world that shows people in their full essence and their full image. If you grow up in America, you pick up magazines, you watch TV, it's like there are subtle messages that are sent to us. I remember at a relatively young age, looking at magazines and pointing out to people like, here's an issue of GQ. And I'm like, had to get to like page 75 before I saw the first Black person. When you look at billboards and everything that shows beauty and goodness looks like something you're not. Or when people see something, they believe that they can be that thing. And when you look at TV and film and you never see someone that looks like you being something positive, or, it's like, even now as I watch the things that my children watch, like cartoons like PJ Masks, there's not a Black child in the whole thing. They're probably afraid of, well, if we can't make the bad guys Black, and and so it's like they wind up just making everyone white. Or you look at something like the Bubble Guppies, and it's like they have the Black looking one and the Asian looking one, but the two that come out at the beginning and introduce and host the show are the white ones. The one who loves to dance is Gobi, the Black one. And it's like, I'm up here trying to figure out, how can I get her to watch Doc McStuffins all day long? And so it's like, we have to understand that if I am a white kid, and I'm just going to use stuff from when I was growing up, it was like you had rednecks like the Dukes of Hazzard, but you also had Dallas and Dynasty. You had middle class people. You had working class people like Roseanne. And it's like you saw a full gamut of what it was to be a white child growing up and what you could be. And I remember when The Cosby Show came out, it was like we were so happy. But then there were even people like, that's unrealistic. And I'm like, not really, because I'm from Baltimore, Maryland, which is more than 50% Black. And I had the honor of growing up in an environment, and I, to this day, can go on Facebook. We recently had a conversation where all the people from my circle were talking about there were 3 Black doctors that almost every Black kid in Baltimore had. We had Black doctors, Black dentists, and so I see where all of these people have gone to because of what they saw growing up. But I also see people who didn't have those experiences and the outcomes haven't been as good. So the key to the stereotypes is letting people see themselves as full human beings that can be any and everything.
Absolutely. I think a little bit, even what you're saying right now is a little bit of call out culture, calling out the media, calling out people in your life, calling out your friends. And I think that brings us to a good place to talk about Haley's character and Chris's character and the roles that they play in this story. Angie, do you want to speak a little about how that all intertwines?
Yeah, Haley and Chris were the 2 hardest characters for me to write. It was funny. I was having a conversation with my literary agent about it, and we were talking about when I first started working with him. And he admits that he used to be a Chris back in the day. And so if it weren't for him helping me with that character, I'm not sure I could have pulled it off, because I've never been and will never be a young, straight, rich, white boy, So I had to get some insight on that. But those characters, they were important for me to write because I know those actual people. I knew a Haley. I had a Haley. In fact, my real life Haley read The Hate U Give and was like, "Oh my God, Angie, was someone like this?" And I was like, "Yeah." And she goes, "Oh my God, who?" And I said, "Look in a mirror." So we haven't really spoken since. Anyway, I had these people in my life. I had a Chris, I had a Haley, and the thing about them was both of them, they have so much privilege. The difference between Chris and Haley is that Chris comes to recognize his privilege a little bit more. Now, I will say this, and I always say this, Chris is not woke. Even when the book ends, Chris is not woke. The book starts, Chris is in a coma. By the time the book ends, he's drowsy. He's still not woke, okay? Haley's still just knocked out, okay? Neither of them are woke. All right. Now, the difference, though, and the reason it was important for me to have Chris, this straight, rich, white boy who has all the privilege in the world, he has to come to recognize he has privilege. Privilege is not a bad word. Privilege does not mean that somebody doesn't work hard for what they get. Privilege means that you do not have to deal with things because of the color of your skin. You do not face obstacles because of the color of your skin. If your parents never had to sit down with you and have a talk with you about what to do if a cop pulls you over because they're afraid you're going to lose your life, congratulations, you're privileged if you've never had that conversation. All right. So Chris has all the privilege in the world. And if a young man like him can come to the realization that one, he has it, and two, he needs to start being at least an ally, there's hope for a lot of us. And so I wanted to show this character coming to that realization and starting to become an ally. But even ally should not be Chris's final form. Nobody's final form should be ally, because ally is, again, going to what we were saying. That's being performative. To be really helpful in all of this, you need to be a co-conspirator. That's what we need more of. So Chris has to get to the point of being a co-conspirator. Now, Haley, the thing about Haley, and I wanted to show my readers this, is that you're going to have some Haleys in your life. And what Star has to come to realize, and what I hope my readers realize, is it's not your job to fix that person. Sometimes it's okay to walk away from that. I'm sorry if I just spoiled the book for everybody, but it's okay to walk away from that at times. It's okay to protect yourself at times. It's okay to recognize that that person, their change, that's on them. They have to get to that point themselves. So it was important for me to show these two characters, one who gets to that point on his own to an extent, and the other who doesn't, because these are real life people. These are people that exist amongst us every single day. And I want young people to know how to deal with that a little bit better. But I also hope that the real Chris's and the real Haleys recognize themselves in the pages, unlike my real Haley did.
Yeah. And Sabrina, you played Haley. What did you learn playing that character?
She's dope. No. We had so many interesting conversations in the being aware of like the Haleys in our lives, and for me, the reason why it was like such an important character to play is because I've witnessed and experienced a lot of that behavior from people in my lives that just aren't aware of it. And what was always interesting is for people to like I labeled Haley as someone that just is very ignorant, you know what I mean? And she has the ability to learn, but she hasn't come to that realization herself, and she needs to come to that realization herself. She's one of those people that thinks that she's not racist because she has a Black friend. And I think that's been something that I thought we moved a little bit more forward in our thinking when it came to that specific discussion. But a reason why I think, and I keep stressing people to come back and read this book, is to just also do a lot more listening. We need to listen to these stories, and a little less like interjecting when it comes to things that we don't have a say in. Like, we don't have those experiences. Haley didn't have the experiences that Star had, and she was kind of standing by acting as if she was a victim, and she wasn't. So I don't know, I've so many thoughts about playing Haley. She's definitely not like the best person ever, but definitely a very, very important character that needs to be seen on screen a lot more, especially for young girls my age. I think there's not a whole lot of her being seen on screen. So thanks to Angie, she exists.
Tina, wanna?
Yeah, I just wanted to compliment your characters, Angie, because I think, having attempted to write teen villains, I think something like with a character like Haley, which you capture so well, is like, she's not just like a two-dimensional villain, because like the kind of worst thing about her is she thinks she's right. She's 100% wrong, but she has a point of view where she just really thinks she's right. And that, I think, makes it so much more impactful, because that's how it plays out with real people, right? And I think also I loved about the character Star, I love how when she sometimes was at home in her neighborhood, she felt like a phony. Like, I love how complex and all her relationships had to be, because she felt like she was, pulled between these two worlds. But yes, that's I think the key. Also, Sabrina's good at playing these parts, because the person playing them has to treat them like they're not wrong, even when they're totally wrong.
Camille?
Yeah, I think Sabrina, you brought up a really good point about listening, because I feel like a lot of people hear racism or you're racist and they think negativity. And I think that when I express that, or when I think that, I'm saying you're uneducated and you're unaware, and it's not a negative thing, but hear me so I can either educate you in that moment, or hear me so that you can understand that here's a moment for you to be educated or find a way to educate yourself. It's the word racism or racist it's like a trigger word for people. And, you know, it also, it can be learned from example, your parents, your family, and you have no idea that you're being subjected to that type of environment, and you're learning these things from people that you respect and that you look up to. So listening is number one. Listening is the number one rule right now in general for everybody, for myself, like just opening our ears and really hearing each other.
Yeah, I think that's a really good transition to a question I'm going to throw towards Chad. Hannah asks, how can I discuss the topic of race with my family? We are all white. They don't listen to me.
Yeah, I definitely think I can speak to this one. I'm seeing this a lot because I came back from New York and I'm in Arkansas, and my town is like 99% white where I live. And, you know, you get on Facebook and like Tina was saying, you want to like kind of walk away from these conversations, but that is privilege, being able to just be like, I'm going to unfriend you and not like dive into this. But I do think that like a lot of the conversations I have, it's hard to speak to somebody that's not ready to listen. Like you can't really get through to somebody that's not willing to hear you, right? But I also am like learning the power of just like planting the seed. And like if we just like start the conversation, allowing that to, even if it's just saying, hey, that's wrong. Have you read this? Like, are you reading? Like, are you up to date on what's happening? And that happened to a guy at my high school. And I was like, hey, have you read Stamped? Like, I'm reading that right now. You should read it with me. We'll like read it together. And he got the book and now is reading it and was like, hey, I am reading this. I'm finding this interesting. I didn't know this or that, you know. And I think that right there is just like the beginning of a longer conversation, because a lot of these people are not ready to have the conversation. So it's like seeing the small victories as a win instead of thinking it's gonna happen overnight. Because I do think a privilege that I have as a white person is like instant gratification. Like I want things to be fixed overnight. Like I've heard people say like the pandemic, like the most American thing is just like we got bored with it and now we're like whatever. And I think that's kind of what's happening with racism is people are like, why isn't this fixed? Like we talked about it. And it's like, yeah, this is a journey that we're on. And I think that it is privileged by just saying like, I'm gonna have one conversation and then I did my thing. And like Angie said, I'm an ally now. I'm like, no, you have to be in this for the long haul and like be ready to have these conversations and like help people unlearn, especially my family and friends that are older than me, that it's like been taught, it's a system that's been built and we have to help take it down brick by brick instead of just thinking it's going to happen at once.
Yeah.
I was gonna say, I think it's, you know, it's hard too, because if you're one of our younger fans, you know, it's hard to stand up, but I think is calling things out when you see it. You know, if you've got those like older aunts and uncles who make jokes that are not cool, and just being like, you know, sometimes it's interesting to ask people like, why would you say that? And people be like, it's a joke. And then you'd be like, can you explain the joke to me? Like what? And sometimes if you give people more rope, they kind of wilt under their own opinion in a good way. But there was this post a month or so ago of a very young white girl arguing, you probably saw it, it was viral, like arguing with her parents who were off camera about Black Lives Matter. And that was sort of inspiring in its own way, because she was standing up to them. But then I saw a post about that post, and forgive me, I want to say maybe it was on Rachel Cargill, but it was someone pointing out like, that it was like close to the right thing, but maybe instead of talking to your relatives about, you know, you don't understand, people in these communities have it so hard, maybe white people need to start looking at ourselves and our own behavior and be like, instead of talking about like what's going on in that neighborhood, it's hard for them, maybe it's more like, what is wrong with us? Like, what is wrong with us that we think these things? Like, when, you know, why do you think this? Based on what? Just continue to ask ourselves these questions. Also, I think it's you got to resist the temptation. Everyone wants to like other themselves and be like, well, I'm not Amy Cooper. Like we love to watch that video of Amy Cooper because we're like, oh, she's terrible. I'm not her. And it's like, but you still kind of have to like examine what percentage of you is her, and like what you can actively do better. It's and I think it's also, like we've been saying, like it's time to listen without responding and take your lumps. Like we just have to white people need to take our lumps and listen. And I will do that now.
Chad, did you have a thought on that?
Yeah, well, I think Tina brought up a point, like being younger and having conversations with your parents and stuff. And like you live at their house, and I'm living at my parents' house now, and I'm living rent free. So I have to respect them, you know. But I think there's a group on Facebook that I just looked at, had like 5,000 followers now, but it's called Rock the Table. And it was created by some Southern people that were like, hey, I need help. Like, I need like a little bit of a script, kind of like we've been doing with petitions, where it's like, I don't know how to begin this conversation. And so how do I do that in a way that's like gives me a little bit of like posting a news article and saying, how do I go about this? This is what so-and-so said. And how do I begin this conversation? And people are getting in there and encouraging young people with, here's how you respond to that. And here's how you can shut that down, or like start more of a dialogue, because I think people are scared that they're going to say the wrong thing. So it's kind of an encouraging group to figure out how to begin those conversations with your family. So it's called Rock the Table. If you want to look it up, it's really cool.
Nice. Angie, any thoughts on beginning steps on having a big impact on your community?
Yeah, you know, it's interesting because people are always more afraid, it seems, of being called racist than of being racist. It's very fascinating. Like just that whole angle of it is very fascinating. As far as changing things, I'm a firm believer that if you want to change the world, you got to start by changing the world right around you. And that can start with your family and your friends, and it can go beyond that, you know. But I think that everything that's been said already is pretty right. Like that's perfect, because young people, they want to speak up and they want to speak out, and they're like, okay, I'm ready to hit the streets, I'm ready to do this. Sometimes it's just you calling out the stuff that's happening right around you that makes a big difference. I always challenge young people to ask yourselves, do I know what it's like to be someone who isn't like me in my neighborhood, in my school, in my community? Someone who's not of the same race as me, someone who is not of the same religious beliefs as me, someone who's not of the same sexual orientation as me. Do I know what it's like to be them? Do I know? And if you don't know, find out. And you'll be surprised to know that there are things happening right around you every single day that you have the ability to change. Sometimes it's just changing people in the little comments that they've made that made a marginalized person feel uncomfortable. And when you find those things out, your goal is to figure out a way to fix it, figure out a way to make that environment better, because that's what we're talking about. We're talking about having a society where every single person should be able to live their life however they live their life without the discomfort of racism and bigotry. That's what we're talking about at the end of the day. So if you can find out those things happening around you and you decide to change them, you will be well on your way to helping to change the world. I promise. Baby steps. It's a marathon, not a sprint.
I thought a really interesting part of the book was the walkout at school. And we have a question from Sabrina M. When the kids walked out at school only to get out of class, what would you have done? And I'm going to throw that to Christina.
Yeah, that's such an interesting question, because, you know, we each have a different experience in our high schools, right? Like, and what that experience was for us. For me, I went to a predominantly white high school. I was one of the few Latin Middle Eastern kids at the school. So I had a specific experience at my school in Arizona. And part of me wants to feel like, you know, you ask yourself that question, would I walk out? And if I walked out, why would I walk out? Would I walk out to get out of class? Would I not walk out to make a statement? But also both of those things can be scary and can be uncomfortable, because you don't, you know, I think being a young person is so complicated in so many ways, of trying to fit in, of trying not to be bullied, of trying to understand other people, of trying to listen to your parents, which is one of, I think, the most interesting things about having this book required for younger people, is that a lot of the things that we grow up believing is based on what our parents are teaching us. And so I actually think it should be required reading of everybody, because I think no matter what age you are, you can start learning and helping your children. But I mean, the walkout question is really difficult. I don't know what everyone else thinks, because I was someone that didn't want to go against the grain because I was afraid, and I was very on my own. And so, but I also, yeah, it's a really hard question to ask, and to answer, honestly.
Yeah, I'm not sure what I would have done either. I would like to think that I would react similarly to Star, mostly because, like Star, well, I didn't go to a predominantly white high school. I actually went to a predominantly Black high school, but I was in all of the gifted and talented classes, and everyone that I was in class with was white. So I never saw the Black people at my school. I feel like I went to a predominantly white school. And I think that I would have stayed, but I wasn't close to the Black people in my school as well. So it's a really hard question. But there is another question from Lydia about our personal experiences with racism in school. And when I transferred to a new school district in middle school. And it wasn't a big change, but I didn't know anyone there. And the first day that I got there, they gave me my schedule, and it was all lower level classes. There were no accelerated classes on the schedule. And I said, oh, this is wrong. You should probably call my mom or look at my GPA or look at anything from my old school. And they were like, oh no, I think it's right. And I made them look up my GPA and all of the paperwork, and they were like, oh, we're so sorry, we just assumed. And that was in 6th grade. So that's one of like 30,000 things that have happened to me in my life, but those were the adults at my school, right? So that was the first thing that welcomed me into the middle school world. That wasn't even the kids. And when we talk about it being systemic, in combination with stereotypes, that's where it all gets kind of mixed up together. Rick, do you want to speak to your experiences?
Yeah. I'm gonna try to give a quick capsule of my schooling. I'm, like I said, Baltimore being more than 50% Black. From kindergarten, my teachers were Black. My mother is a teacher. My aunt is a principal. So I was around Black people all the way through elementary school. Then I started to be a part of the advanced academic programs at middle school and high school. But in Baltimore, even those schools, if they were public, were more than 50% Black. It wasn't until I went to college at the University of Maryland where I finally was in a situation where I was not surrounded by Black people. And I found little microaggression type things that would happen. Because even at University of Maryland, it's a school of like 40,000 people. So even though it's 5% Black, that's still thousands of Black people. And the Black community was very tight. I pledged the Black fraternity. So my experience was still in the midst of all of the white people around me was still very Black. But going to class was when you were in the situations where you were maybe the only Black person there, unless it was an Afro-American studies class. And I remember in one of my classes as a freshman, they got to talking about schools in inner cities, i.e. Black schools. And the professor asked, hey, can anyone speak to that? And I was the only Black person, so I was like, yeah. And I, based on my experience, I was like, it's really not that different from going to a white school, you know? And they corrected me. Like, no, in Black schools, they don't have as many books, and it's a lot of crime, and there's metal detectors. And I'm like, I am a Black person that, you know, unfortunately, I've always been one to speak up. So I was like, what are you talking about? I'm Black. I went to those schools. What are you trying to tell me about my experience? But those are the types of things that you face and can possibly face as a Black student, especially once you're in those environments where you're one of the only ones. And that kind of mirrors how life can be, you know, when you're in those situations where a lot of it is like circumstantial evidence. You can't prove it beyond a shadow of a doubt, but your Black spidey senses lets you know that, why did I have to provide the extra information to get my apartment, even though I work on Broadway and make a substantial income that is more than what my rent is per month, according to their standards? You know, why is it that, you know, when you go out to audition for this commercial and you're like, this product, there's no way in the world they're gonna have a Black guy be the spokesperson. And then sure enough, you're like, it goes that way. But fortunately, you're one of the Black guys who gets to be in that room. And, you know, so it's like you're in the situation where it's like, my competition when I go into the audition isn't against all of the actors. I'm like, I gotta be the best Black guy. And if they decide they want a Black guy, then I'll get the part. So so the stereotypes and dealing with them is just a matter of being able to be persistent and just continue to move on in spite of the little things that you can't prove.
Yes, absolutely. That was our last question, but I want to give Angie one more opportunity to speak and kind of round this up for us.
Yeah. This conversation, what it has shown, I hope that it's shown everybody, is that this is an ongoing conversation. You know, there's so many things that we all are still learning and still becoming aware of. And I want young people to recognize that you don't have to know it all right now. It's okay. We're still learning. And you don't have to be right all the time. It's okay to be wrong at times. I think we all have a fear of being wrong. Be more afraid of being, be okay with being wrong, but be even better with being corrected and learning from it and deciding to grow from it, because that's what we're all doing. We're all learning, we're all growing, we're all evolving. So you don't have to have all the answers, but make yourself dedicated to finding more answers. And I promise you that will make a huge difference. So thank y'all for this opportunity. I really appreciate it. This has been a great conversation.
Thank you, Angie. It's a real honor to get to talk to you.
Yes, this has been an incredible conversation. And thank you, Angie and the cast and Tina for joining us, and also the fans for sending all of these awesome questions and jumping into the discussion with us. If you want to keep the conversation going, don't forget to head over to our Instagram. There will be some more cast members there keeping the same conversation going. Also, we're really excited that after such a positive response to the hate you give, we will be announcing our second book super soon, and we're excited to keep all of the conversations going with more books. So thank you so much, everybody. Thanks for joining. Have a good day.